Welcome to Fundraising Ignited with Nanette Shor. Thanks for joining me today. I'm a fundraising consultant with Shor Fundraising Strategies, helping organizations excel in their fundraising efforts and deliver the best quality services they can to our community. On this show, you will hear from guests who work for nonprofits, volunteer, our clients, serve on boards, contributors. You will hear their why and the value of the life-saving work they're doing right here in Central Virginia. And on our show today, we have Emily J., who is the CEO of Medical Home Plus. So thanks for being here today.
Thanks
Emily.
for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to jump right in and just let the community hear who you are and how you landed at Medical Home Plus and sort of what you all do. So start with you and sort of your journey. And
yeah. My name is Emily J. Cristoforo, as Nanette said. I actually have a degree in healthcare administration. When I first graduated from college, I was working initially in long-term care administration and then went on to work for a private concierge medical practice. And, met my husband, we got married, and we had just had our first child. And I, always knew I wanted to continue working even past children, but was really looking for a better work-life balance that I did not feel I could be afforded in the corporate world. So really wasn't officially looking, but like I said, I had just had a baby, and our board president at the time had a son in my mom's preschool class. And so he came into school one day and asked my mom if she knew anyone looking for a job. And my mom was like, well, my daughter might be, what is it?
wow, maybe.
So I didn't have any nonprofit experience. I really didn't, I've always had a real passion for serving individuals with disabilities, but really didn't know what I was stepping into beyond that. So took the job though on a part-time basis to start. That was 14 years ago. But, selfishly, one of my initial draws to the company was I knew it would give me a lot of work-life balance and flexibility for my own children. The two founders of Medical Home Plus are pediatricians, and they always, really respect boundaries and like balancing your family. And in fact, in my interview, Dr. Colleen Kraft said, "Oh, bring your baby to work with you. Like you can get the work done around your schedule as long as the work gets done." So that was really attractive to me. And now 14 years later and 3 kids later, 4 kids total, I have taken all of my kids to work with me when they were infants. I've never missed a preschool program or a field trip. But even more so than that, I really respect the work that we do and realize how stressful it can be to be a parent and an employee and a daughter and, all the different hats that we wear. But then when you layer on the stress of trying to support a child with a special healthcare need, I really can empathize with the families that we serve. And so I feel really passionately as a mom about the work that we do.
Right.
And that is,
that's what's taking.
Yes.
Tell us who is
MHP? So the organization has been around a little over 20 years. We are a statewide organization. We were initially founded, like I said, by 2 pediatricians. And the reason, really, the problem that they were trying to solve is when parents first receive a diagnosis, or really at any point in the journey in supporting their child with any kind of a special healthcare need, parents can just really feel overwhelmed and not know how to get the right supports in place for their child. And as pediatricians, Dr. Kraft and Dr. Gawanter, our 2 co-founders, really realized that they didn't even have all the resources to be able to support families.
Which is scary on its own,
right? As doctors, and as doctors, they certainly didn't have the time to spend. And so they actually incubated MHP initially within their pediatric practice. And they began this peer-to-peer kind of mentoring model. They took parents that were a little bit further on in their journey and started matching them to parents that needed that level of support. Saw that was going to be really successful. So a couple of years later, incorporated us into our own organization, and now here we are today. Wow. About 10 years ago, probably a little more than that now, we actually started a new to us service at the time, and that is our IEP Advisory Services Scholarship Fund. IEP stands for Individual Education Program, and that's the legal document within a public school setting that supports a child's academic goals, any accommodations that the school is going to provide, and really kind of sets the stage for how that academic year is going to go and how the school and the parents are going to measure that child's progress. And the IEP process can be very daunting for families. It's very emotionally charged. It's a very legally based process. And so while we don't provide legal advice, we do provide advocates that that are on our staff, on our team, and we will actually attend meetings with families.
Wow.
And we do that on a need basis. So families that couldn't go out and hire their own advocate can work with a member of our staff, so that we're hopefully helping to level the playing field for those kids. That service has really become, over the last 10 years or so, what we're most known for, because it's very unique. We're the only organization on the East Coast that has a scholarship fund of that type.
So when you say scholarship, do the families pay it all, or is it paid based on scale?
Actually, no, we award the service 100% free of charge. We do have a financial screening process, obviously. We don't ever turn any family away. So even if a family doesn't qualify financially for the service, we can still help them.
Right.
And they can work with one of our advocates on staff on a private basis, on a, payment basis. But that's outside of MHP. So, but no, the families don't pay anything. The only thing we ask for is that they give us a testimonial at the end, so that
That's
we
a
can
little price to
use
pay,
it in
not
our
a big deal.
storytelling.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's amazing. So on an average year, how many families do you work with, do you think?
So typically the IEP service supports 150 families annually. And this is a very highly engaged process.
Right.
And it's expensive because it takes, a large amount of time with the IEP advisor to be able to support that family. So that is my greatest challenge as the chief fundraising officer as well for the organization. Yes, to keep enough money in that pot, so to speak, so that we truly don't ever have to turn a family away. But we're kind of in this period of extreme growth right now. We've actually fared really, really well through the pandemic with fundraising efforts and growth efforts. So we're hoping that in the next year we'll be able to serve many, many more families.
Do you have a waiting list?
We don't actually right now, but we also don't do much marketing.
Right. I was gonna say it's the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
So you got to get.
Yeah. So what we're working on right now is a big community outreach push to be able to let lots more families know about our services, and really work to strengthen referral partnerships with other professionals in the field. So we know that that's going to create a little bit of a pipeline, but that's all a part of like our strategic plan right now, and in terms of funding that and really growing those services to serve more and more families.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like others, I'm so happy to hear that the community supported during COVID, and so many nonprofits actually excelled in their fundraising because we asked and the community delivered. We said, this is what we need, and they came forth. And so it's really heartwarming to know that we live in a community that really does that. It's really,
I think, people saw a lot of different hardships, and a lot of different, areas of need. And, instead of just hanging on to, things, their assets to strengthen their families, they saw themselves, donors saw themselves as a part of the community at large. And that has really made our community stronger.
So let's go down that path. What happened mid-March? Early March, you're plugging along and you're doing your job and doing it well, and we all get slapped in the face. How did you all react? The kids aren't in school, but they still were learning. They still had probably greater issues. These kids are probably suffering even more with the change and everything. What happened to MHP in March till now?
As you said, this really, the COVID situation, and particularly the virtual learning environment, really, really wound up creating more of a need for the services that we offer. And so we actually had to get a little bit creative with how we, would reach families and how we were doing things. Of course, we brought all of our staff to their homes to work remotely. Luckily, IEP teams and school divisions very quickly started holding virtual meetings. And that was just fine. Our advisors can and still do call in or Zoom in or Microsoft Teams in.
Get in,
come in virtually to these meetings. And what we really found with that, honestly, this program before COVID, pre-COVID, was really limited to the Metro Richmond area because we didn't want to spend a lot of time, driving across the state or whatever. Now we're really not held to any boundaries, inside of Virginia because we can Zoom into these meetings. So we just really tried to remain flexible and accessible to the families. Like I said, initially we got a huge call volume, huge spike in our call volume because parents were very concerned about how their kids were going to learn virtually, particularly if there were added challenges. And so we just really tried to, hold school divisions to FAPE, which stands for free and appropriate public education. And so if kids weren't able to be reached virtually, then, we actually were responsible for getting some of these kids back into school on a very safe and limited basis, not entire classrooms, but, individual children that could be distanced because they weren't able to learn at home. They weren't able to participate virtually. We also created what became a pilot program. We have not put it into like full programming, but we wound up creating a virtual tutoring program as well. And parents or children did have to qualify. We created the criteria around that, but we tried to really help to bridge the gap for some of those kids that maybe couldn't go back physically in person because there were other health concerns or things that their parents didn't want them back in the schools physically, but they still weren't achieving anything academically virtually. So we actually hired 8 virtual tutors and are contracted with them and provided almost 9 months worth of service to a bunch of families throughout the state. And so that was really, really helpful. It was very time intensive.
I bet, just to even get it started.
So, right. So, I don't know if we'll ever make that into a steadfast program for us, but at least to bridge the gap, that was something that we did for the community so that these kids would not fall further behind.
Yeah, and you were doing this while your own 4 children were home in school and trying to take everyone else. So that's truly amazing. And the work you're doing is really saving families from the distress of just not knowing what to do.
Right.
So what were the silver linings you took away from COVID? And if, this program may be one, but what are the things you're doing now that, like you talked a little bit about being able to branch out beyond Richmond?
Yeah. So I think, I think in general and more of like a global sense, even maybe outside of MHP for a minute, I think COVID was a unifier in some ways. I think it helped people to prioritize what was most important, and that's our family and our health and our peace and our well-being. So I do think that on a community level, and like we were talking about with the fundraising, people have been so generous with their time and their funds. So I think that was a silver lining. I also think that, while the parents that we served really were very upset about, their kids missing academic time, and rightfully so, I do feel like COVID in some ways was a little bit of an equalizer because I don't know of any children that really thrived in a virtual environment. No, it's a really good point. It was kind of like, you don't want kids to miss academic time, but at the same time, maybe some of us got a little more back to basics.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it in those terms. And while everyone struggled, it was a different playing field, much more even.
Yeah. I think it extends beyond the academics, of course, too, for all kids, not just kids with special needs. There were some social hits, of course, that happened. But I do think, I think the educational landscape is going to be very different for many years to come. And that's very unfortunate for all children. But I do think, for the most part, most of us as parents don't take our kids being at school for granted anymore, and hopefully, I'm not saying that the parents that we served, prior to COVID did, but at the same time, I think it just sort of helped to set everything into perspective a little bit. Well,
before it was just what they did. It was part of the day. And now, they get to go to school. It's a big deal. It's a big difference.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're here today. What does the next year or 2 years look like for MHP?
Well, like I said, we're in this time of a lot of growth. We just had our 10th annual, our signature fundraiser, largest fundraiser of the year is called Uncork Hope.
Mhm.
And we just had our 10th annual event of that in early November.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we raised more than we've ever raised with that event alone. We raised a little over $230,000.
And you were in person.
We were in person. We had to pivot our plan several times, even like 2 weeks before we made another change. But we were able to be in person. We really limited, normally it's an over 500 person event. And at the end, the final iteration of it was outside, and it was a chilly night. But it was outside, and we only allowed up to 150 people to come in, and we
still raised that kind
and
of
we
money.
still raised that kind of money.
Wow.
Now, in full disclosure, we did have a very generous donor match, 100,000 of it. But we raised over $130,000 on our own with like a fifth of our crowd, which was really amazing. But again, I think the community has just been so generous and so grateful for, all the people, all the helpers.
Right.
And I think we all have, kind of education and our kids on our radar, because I feel like that generation has really suffered the most through COVID.
Absolutely.
So we're trying to use that as our launching point to really, really inspire growth. We've just hired our third IEP advocate who joined our staff about a month ago. And we have 2 positions open right now for other administrative positions. So we're really looking to, grow our operations. One thing we're really going to be working on within the next year is putting some of our parent workshops and just kind of general, resource coordination support or IEP support, making those recommendations into modules and courses and hosting them online. Because we feel like, with trying to drum up these extra referrals and all of our marketing efforts, we feel like that we are going to create a little bit of a pipeline. And so we want to kind of offer some base level knowledge for families that they can experience from the comfort of their own home and on their own time. And then once they're able to sort of get their feet under them, so to speak, then, then they can move on to the next phase, which involves working with an advisor.
I mean, you guys are doing amazing work. Thank you for all you're doing in the community, really.
Yeah.
Anything, I mean, you've talked about a lot of things that are next. Anything right now that the community can help you with? What are you looking for on the shorter term that people can kind of grab?
Well, we definitely always need volunteers.
Okay.
Our board is actually in the midst of some growth as well.
Okay.
We've just formed a number of board committees, community filled committees. So there are opportunities there. There are always volunteer opportunities around our Uncork Hope event, which, it's like I get done with one and then I have a little bit of a break and then I have to start planning the next one.
Your break's almost over, right?
I know, it's January 1, we're going to start.
Where did you have it this year?
We had it at the Virginia Cliff Inn, which is not our usual venue either, but it was perfect because we can be outside and undercover, but in the open air.
I've been there.
It'll be back inside next year. An outdoor event in November was a challenge, but everybody did well. We had heaters and everybody was.
It's a great place.
So we always need volunteers. I think our other biggest thing though is that community outreach piece, developing those stronger referral partners. So connections to other professionals that interface with families with special healthcare needs so that they can know about MHP services and I can network with them and let them know how to best refer a family in. We've actually created a warm referral line that allows our referral partners they have to be entered into our system, but once that happens, then they can actually send us an email through a customer service system that we use. It's a web-based program. So they don't even have to pick up the phone. They can just send us like an intake form for that family and it becomes a warm handoff. So it just helps families get through the pipeline a little quicker. Yeah.
So if someone's listening, a mother, father, grandparent listening and said, I think my child might need some. At what point, when do they call you?
Well, I would always encourage, even if a family doesn't have like a burning question or a burning need right now, I would always encourage families just to reach out to us. I'm always amazed. I don't do any of the resource coordination or IEP coordination. I really just run the business side of things. But of course, I hear, my employees talking. And one thing that always amazes me is that we take such a proactive approach. So a family might call in for sort of their chief complaint, if you will, or, their chief reason for calling. And by the time they get off of that initial phone call with one of our advisors, there might be 3 or 4 or 5 other things that they're going to be working on with MHP staff that they didn't even know to ask. So we're very proactive. We're very holistic. And we will let families know about any resources or any things that we can be helping them with, even if they don't know to ask. Right. So I would always encourage, and there are a couple of things I don't think I've mentioned. One, we're not at all diagnosis specific. So some other organizations will do pieces and parts of what we do, but they might be very geared towards a specific diagnosis. What we've found is that when you kind of boiled back that diagnosis, the issues that these families face are very generalized. So we will serve any family, even if their child doesn't yet have a diagnosis and they're seeking
that's
that.
what I was going to ask. Like they call and say, something's just not right at school. Like I can tell my kid is just not. Yeah. Is that a good enough reason?
Absolutely.
To call?
So we'll help them walk through that process. And then the other thing that I'm not sure if I mentioned is that original model of, matching parent to parent is still our business model today. Okay. So all of my employees that work on the front lines, so to speak, with these families, that are giving expert advice are also parents of children with special health care needs. So not only do they, have professional experience, but they have personal experience, which I think is even more important. A lot of the work that our employees are doing can even be taught. It's learned through life experience. And we provide a level of emotional support that families can't get other places, which that's what warms my heart.
Absolutely. And I was just going to ask you, what warms your heart? You just are getting on my questions before I ask them. That's great.
Well, we just actually recently made a video. I hope I can say it without crying for Uncork. And that I just off the cuff came up with this line. It's really not a line. It's what I believe like at my core. But I think one of the like worst human emotions that someone can feel is loneliness. And so I'm really proud that MHP alleviates that for families. Even if we can't solve the problem, in the first pass, we will let families know that they're not alone, and we can provide that level of empathy and solidarity that we all need. A friend. We all need somebody who understands what we're going through, what our family and our child is going through. And that's what MHP does that you can't put a price tag on.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I think that's so important because you're not necessarily going to make anything go away. Right. You help people learn how to deal with whatever they're faced with. Right. But you're there. And I love that families can call you just to say, I don't know. Like, I have this inkling. And I went through that with a couple of my kids. Like, is something wrong? Is something not wrong? What do we, Right. And so you guys are there for that. That's beautiful. Absolutely. So how do people reach you in our last little few seconds?
So always the website is a good way, just, to reference that for information. The website is www.medhomeplus.org. Okay. They can give us a call. They can send us an email. Our general email is info@medhomeplus.org. Okay. And by phone, we're 804-330-5030. So anytime, day or night, our staff is always here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. I feel like our time went so fast, and we'll have to continue this, but love the work you guys are doing. We've always had a special connection, and I really appreciate what you all are doing for our community, and really now those you can reach so far out. That's great. Yeah. And again, thanks for being here. Shor Fundraising Strategies is a nonprofit consulting firm focused on engaging with nonprofits and helping them excel in their fundraising efforts, allowing them to deliver even more services to the community like MHP does. And we're so proud of them. I focus on fundraising and strategy planning, event financial growth, board and key volunteer development, organizational financial goals, individual donor cultivation, corporate relations, and so much more. I bring over 35 years of experience, both in the for-profit world, the nonprofit as a volunteer, and as a professional as well, to my clients. I can be reached at nannetteshor@gmail.com. And I hope you have a great week and consider supporting a nonprofit of your choice, one that means something to you, with your time, your talent, and your treasure. Thank you for joining us. And again, Emily, thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
And we'll keep talking until
He comes to
so
cut
the
this
cut
off.
to
Yeah.
camera gets
Thank
turned
you.
off.
This
So,
is fun.
yeah, it is a great opportunity
Yeah.
for the community
Yeah.
to listen.
What a pretty banner.
Yes, sir?
Yep.
Okay, here, you guys can look in.
So you're gonna have to cut the last part.
Okay. How are you?
Hi,
Hello.
how are you? And I'm gonna be rude.